All studies show that the more positive, value-centered sex education kids receive from home, the less promiscuous and the less confused they're going to be. Now, how many of you received good, healthy, value-centered sex education from your home when you were growing up from your parents? Now, I doubt if very many of you would raise your hand if we were all together. The truth is that most parents did not receive good, healthy, value-centered sex education. In fact, I was with a group of people, 450 people. I asked, how many of you received good, positive, healthy sex education? 4 people raised their hand. So again, that makes it confusing for us sometimes. But what we want to do today is talk about teaching your children healthy sexuality, and it's a critical part of a kid's development. So let's start with the end goal in mind. Sexual integrity for our children. That's our desire, and in reality, that's also their desire. To get there, let's introduce what we call the purity code. The purity code goes like this. No matter what the age of your kids, the purity code is important for their future or even for their life now if they're a little bit older. In honor of God, my family, and my future spouse, I commit my life to sexual purity or sexual integrity. And the interesting side to this is that it says in honor of God. Okay, so it's a spiritual issue. My family, so we bring our family into it, and then also for kids, and sometimes they're very young, so they're not thinking about it, their future spouse, because obviously that's going to play a determining factor in terms of even the relationship they have with their spouse as time goes on. Okay, now how does it go? It involves this. So this involves 4 elements. Honor God with your body. The Bible says to honor God with our body. Secondly is renew your mind for good. You know, the Bible says, do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. I say to kids all the time, hey, the most powerful sex organ is not your private parts. The most powerful sex organ you have is your mind. And so that's what we want to do as parents, is help them understand that they renew their mind for good. Good things in, good things out. Bad things in, bad things out. The next one involves turning your eyes from worthless things. That's what the Bible says in Psalm 119:37. And then the last one, and maybe the most important one, is guard your heart above all else. The Bible says, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Now, even those people who would raise their hand and say, my parents taught me healthy sex education from home, they might not have had their parents teach them about guarding their heart. And so we want to make sure that we help our kids learn to guard their heart, because emotions can get in the way, and drama, and in love and not in love, and infatuation and peer pressure and all those other kind of things. So again, guard your heart above all else. Now let's look at some facts. There is a sexuality crisis going on. And everybody would say it. There's a secular perspective, there's a Christian perspective. They all would say there's a sexuality crisis at hand, but they look at it differently. So the secular perspective says this: it's the result of promiscuity. Not just promiscuity, but the result from promiscuity. Sexually transmitted diseases, unwanted pregnancy, even abortion, post-abortion syndrome is a concern for everybody, single moms, single dads, see. Yet, with the Christian perspective, it comes from a different angle. It's the whole person and a concern for the whole person. It's developing healthy values and responsibility and consequences. And interestingly enough, we talk a lot about the physical consequences, but there's also emotional consequences. It's right or wrong. It's a relationship with God. It's a relationship with that other person. So they look at it just a tad bit differently. And then everybody probably understands this, that it's what we call the instant intimacy perspective. You see, sex fools kids into instant intimacy. Authorities tell us that it takes about 2 years to actually know if you're in love. I think that was different for Kathy and I. First day I met her, I felt like I was in love. It must have been infatuation or at least puppy love, but it was real to me. But it actually did take about 2 years to actually know that we were in love, okay? However, if a couple is having sexual intercourse, then studies show that it takes about 2 to 3 years, and it will fool them into thinking that they're in love because the magic and the beauty and the incredible intimacy that takes place. So again, it fools them into intimacy when they really don't know if they're connected or not. I had a couple when I was counseling one time who came into my office. They had a 2- and a 5-year-old, and they were at it in terms of their marriage. And finally, as I got to know them, they'd come from pretty tough backgrounds, and there'd been some drug and alcohol abuse on both sides and a lot of promiscuity, and then they became Christians. And when they became Christians, they were going to not have sexual intercourse before marriage. And of course, that didn't work. And so they were, totally involved in a relationship. And I finally said, did you guys get married only because you were having sex? Because I couldn't figure out why they got married. They didn't even seem to have liked each other. And they kind of looked at each other and went, well, that was kind of me. And the other one said, well, that's me. And they didn't know that. They'd never talked about it, but it had fooled them into instant intimacy. And now there was a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And I wish it was a great story and they all came together. But actually the story is a story of divorce and brokenness because they made some poor choices. The other aspect that I think it's important to understand is what we call cohabitation. So in the 1970s, 75% of the population said they would not live with someone before instead. Today, it's about 75% say that they would. Now, in a blog that I wrote a number of years ago now, 2 or 3 years ago anyway, I wrote a blog called The Science of Cohabitation. It kind of took off and went everywhere because I didn't use Christian input, I just talked about science. So what science tells us, secular science tells us, is that when people cohabitate, they have a greater chance of, when they get married, having a divorce, when they get married, a greater chance of adultery, and frankly, less sexual satisfaction, which is kind of interesting. So those are some of the results of instant intimacy that we forget about. And so people are being fooled in some ways into thinking that they're in love when actually they're just having an incredibly, great experience with physical intimacy, and it's really not working out for them in the long run, okay? So this is why we go back to something like the purity code. But to do that, we've got to understand why kids are making sexual decisions. And I think they're making these sexual decisions based on 3 things. One is peer pressure or the pressure to conform. Today, many kids tell me that they feel a pressure even from their good friends to have a physical, intimate relationship so that they can sort of talk about it and people are talking about it and sharing their different experiences. And so there is a pressure that kids feel. Secondly, and this may be one of the most important, and a lot of times we miss this, is that kids are making sexual decisions based on emotional involvement that exceeds their maturity level. Let me say that again, emotional involvement that exceeds their maturity level. So let me pick on a 14-year-old girl. Okay, I can pick on a boy just the same, but we're going to pick on a girl. I've got 3 daughters. She has a boyfriend who's 16, and he isn't a bad kid. In fact, he just doesn't know how to handle his hormones, and he has lots of adrenaline and lots of feelings. They're in love, but like I said, it's puppy love, and puppy love is real to puppies, so there's not good discernment. And so their emotional involvement exceeded their maturity level, and they find themselves with some compromising sexual values, see? And that's important for us to understand, that without kids getting information, they oftentimes, it's that emotional involvement exceeded their maturity level and they didn't know how to say no, or they didn't know how to say stop, because no one really helped them go that way. And I think that's the job of a parent. Thirdly, it's been what I've been saying, lack of information. Again, back to the fact that the more positive, value-centered sex education from home, the less promiscuous, and by the way, less confused kids will be. Okay, so expect the conversations when you give information and when you have dialogue with your kids to be awkward. I mean, let's be honest. I write and I speak on this subject. I write books on this subject. And for me, with my own kids, I stuttered. They told me that my bald head sweat, my ears turned red. Now, I'm not sure all of that was totally true, but I'm telling you, it was not easy. So lack of information is a key factor. And yet what we do is we put all of our energy into, soccer and school work and all these other things, and then we back off talking to them about any kind of helpful sex education. Now, this is kind of a fun video. It's a video that we produced at HomeWord. It's on the Jones family, and the mom and the dad are going to talk to their son and their daughter about sex education. Here it is.
It's not easy keeping up with the Joneses. There's Nelson, the wise and wacky head of the household, and Carol, the nurturing, emotional center of the family. Mix those rascally teens, Bud and Susie, into the mix, and you've got a home filled with humor. So have a seat and hold on to your funny bone while keeping up with the Joneses.
Coach told me I'm going to be starting next week.
Wow, fantastic, son. I knew your hard work would pay off.
You were right, Dad. Weird thing happened though after practice.
Are some of the boys jealous?
No, they were talking about sex. Do you guys know what that is?
Yeah. What is that?
Bud,
Susie,
let's
go
go
to
to
your
your room. Sex, son, is very natural. Scary. It's scary and frightening sometimes. It's a lot like space travel. See, and, you're out in space. You're going to fly around. You're a little astronaut in there looking around for a space station to dock with.
The mailman will come to you and say,
You sure are pretty. Let me give you this package.
What's in it?
Bad, terrible things. You can't take it.
Why not?
because you have to get married first.
And so you're out there, you're going to be flying around out in space looking for just the right space station to dock with.
What if I run out of fuel?
Oh, don't ever worry about that, see, because guys, they never run out of fuel. And that's why a lot of the guys, when they're journeying through space, they just stop at every space station that comes along. I mean, Pluto, Mars, Venus, everywhere. But you are better than that. You're only going to dock once in your life, so you have to be very careful.
How will I know that it's the right space station?
You'll know. Deep down inside, you'll know. And space station. When you do know that you have the right space station, then you can dock in space station once.
Now, once you marry the mailman, you can open his package. That's what the honeymoon's for.
Oh, what's in it?
A precious little baby.
But I thought you said it was something horrible.
Well, it is if you open the package before your honeymoon.
Do we have a space battle after we dock?
Yes. No, sometimes. Just occasionally. But mostly, what happens is that new people come out.
What do you mean?
Okay, take for example, you're American, right? You,
Right, yeah.
spaceman on the ship there. All right. And let's just say that the space station that you've selected to be the right one is Russian. Why? Because you're a sucker for accents. Okay? So anyway, you, the American, dock with the Russian space station, and out from that come the new people who are Russicans. Does that make sense?
I think so.
I'm so glad we could talk. Come straight to me if you have any more questions.
I will. Did Dad tell you what sex is?
No. I think he wants me to be an astronaut. How about Mom?
Nothing. She's still mad at me for opening those Christmas presents I found early.
You want to look it up on the internet?
Cool.
I love that video. It's just a little goofy, but you know what? Notice that the kids said, let's go check the internet for information. So what's today the #1 place kids get their sex education? It's not from parents. It's not even from their friends. It's from the internet. And I'm not sure I'd trust the internet to be the primary dispenser to my kids for healthy sex education.